Hello and welcome to our first ever edition of Digging In, where we dedicate ourselves to providing truth and uncovering the political tarp that the media has put over truth. The majority of people in America today blindly follow what the media spoon feeds them, and they neglect to dig in to the real truth. Here at Digging In, we dedicate ourselves to giving you the rest of the story. Today, in the country that we live in, we thank God that we can freely and openly give our opinions about certain subjects without fear of persecution. And we pray every night that these rights will never be taken away from us. So today, on Digging In, since it is the month of February, we are going to be talking about Black History Month. Now, Martin, before we get into any sort of writing that our writers did, what do you feel about Black History Month?
I think Black History Month is a fairly necessary month that we should celebrate here, just to remember all the positive impacts that certain people throughout history that happen to be black have had on the world.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but we can't, neglect all of the negative things that our history has to give, If we don't remember history, it will repeat itself. And so we'd want to make sure that nothing like that happens again. So I think it is important that we take the month of February and we really try to remember the history of the African American community in our country, and we really celebrate them. So today, our writer Damani Hemley has given us his perspective about Black History Month. Here's what he said. Why is Black History Month important? Well, this is why. All throughout a young African American's life, he is taught all that of his history is nothing more than a slave, and his mother is no better than a low-down woman who can't get a man to take care of you. If you teach him some positives in his past, he might not be so angry. When you asked what to do, why do we have Black History Month? He will be able to articulate an educated response to your question as to why we have Black History Month. Also, there is a lot of forgotten, if not purposely, suppressed heroes a lot of us do not really know about. That's not really taught in the public school system. So, speaking of the public school system, what they really do is focus on the negatives about Black history. Do you agree with that?
I would say more so, yes.
All right, and but that's not always a bad thing.
No, definitely not. I think we definitely do need to remember all the bad things that have happened back in the past, so as not to repeat them in the future.
So you support the public school system based on their teachings of Black history?
I support the public school system's teaching of Black History Month, at least the negative parts, but we also should remember all the black people that had a positive contribution to the world. Right,
and all of the progress that the black community has made. These people came from slavery where they weren't recognized as human beings. It was a third of a person. And now, we have all of these great accomplishments. Let's look at Benjamin Oliver Davis. What did Benjamin Oliver Davis do, Martin?
Benjamin Oliver Davis, he was the first black Air Force general, and he led the Tuskegee Airmen Flight Squadron, standing up to the military establishment and advancing the cause of black soldiers.
Great thing, great thing. We definitely need to remember all of the achievements that all of these heroes in the black community have made over the years. And this month is very special because in Black History Month, February, we have President's Day. And, no matter how you feel about Barack Obama, no matter if you agreed on him politically, if you look at it, backing up and looking at it at the point of view, at the whole world spectrum, these people who went from, like I said, not even being considered as a person, went to being the leader of the free world. You know, that in itself should say something. And that in itself should say why we have Black History Month. So that achievements like these can progressively get better, and we won't have to even mention like, oh, you know, it was a African American who did this. It was a person who did this. We don't even have to recognize that the race in this matter. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. The moment we start celebrating the differences we have instead of focusing on them, creating political disunity, the closer we come to a more peaceful world where we can all come together and celebrate what we as a species have done, and not we of a race have done.
Very true, very true. Let's look at Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was a poet. He wrote a style in double jazz poetry. It's flowed in a manner that anybody can appreciate it. It's improvisation. It's improv in jazz. It's a very a new thing that was in the jazz community, and it really elevated music to a new level. So we have that to thank with the progressiveness of the African American history. I wish we had some dates on here. I'd like to know when this happened. On the next one, we have 1916. So, you know, very, very, very early. We have Elijah McCoy. What did Elijah do, Martin?
In 1916, McCoy built the graphite lubricator, which allowed new superheater trains and devices to be oiled. In 1920, Elijah started the Elijah McCoy Manufacturing Company. With his new business, he upgraded and sold the graphite lubricator along with other inventions which came out to him out of necessity. He formulated and patented a movable ironing board after his wife expressed a need for a simpler way of ironing clothes. So he was a very, very important innovator as I see this.
Mm-hmm. It's very, very important that we remember innovators like this, no matter what their skin color was. It shows the progressive of humans over time. The new inventions that have come into the world that's made life easier. Now, is that necessarily a good thing? Do you think that these, you know, I understand that in some retrospects that the innovations and the new productions that are coming out that make life easier, that make simple, harder tasks more simple, but does that make us a more lazy society where we don't take the time to do things the way that our the founders did it, that we just have these new inventions and we make everything easier and easier and easier, and we don't really appreciate what we've done?
Well, it should be stated that we created these things for a reason. The reason we create these things is to make our everyday lives easier, but we should also not take them for granted and appreciate the things they've done through a series of self-reflections. The moment we start losing appreciation for these things is the moment we begin to stagnate. And when we begin to stagnate, discord ensues.
Mm-hmm.
So we should definitely appreciate the things that people like McCoy have done for us.
Right, right. And then the age that we live in today, you know, where information is at our fingertips. Here's my thoughts on this, and this is just my opinion. No, this isn't backed up by any science or anything, but I think that it can necessarily be a bad thing, because when you look for very educated human beings, for very educated people, and you ask them questions and they know the answer, you know, you really respect that person, and you really say, you know, they're very intellectual. They really know what they're talking about because they've spent their time studying these things and reading these things and reading what other people has put. Now, if you want to know anything, you can just go on your phone and go on the internet and look it up. And all of these people who spend all this time studying and studying and studying don't get the recognition or appreciation that they should.
I wouldn't say they don't get the recognition and appreciation because they are still labeled as the source, the author, bibliography, things in that nature. Though I will agree that most people, when they're looking at these sources, they don't go and look at the author's name, they don't look at their credentials, they don't get the same amount of credibility off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
It would take research to show that that person would be credible in the field in question.
Right, and it's not just, and it's specific things. You don't really have to work for things that you want to figure out. Like if you want to know something about mechanics, about auto mechanics, then you can just go on and Google search it. You don't have to open up the hood of your car and turn it on and see how it runs and try to figure things out. You can just go Google search it. So does that limit the human mind about what it can figure out and what it can do? Does it just keep us on this one level that, if we want information, we go here. If we want information, we go here, instead of saying, okay, well, let me look at this and let me think about it, like how Isaac Newton did when he was trying to figure out the world. He spent hours and hours and hours thinking about it and try to figure out the world. Does that limit us on our possibilities?
No, I wouldn't say that it does. No? It's just changing the mediums by which we gain information. By reading the information and seeing diagrams and understanding the information about the diagrams, we still would gain the same amount of information, maybe in fact quicker, than going out and testing your car, say, lifting up the hood, turning on the engine, and seeing how everything would run. It's just a safer way in some cases, and a quicker, more efficient, more effective way of learning the things that you would like to learn. Plus, there might be some things that might be out of your reach. Say, you wanted to learn about Indian culture, and yet you live in North America. You can look up credible websites and learn there, as opposed to actually talking to an Indian dude, which probably have some trouble finding here in Florida.
Right. Very, very, very saddening that is. Because Florida was a very, very populous culture of Native Americans, and it's just very much degraded. But let's get back on the subject of Black History Month. So these innovators that we have, like Elijah McCoy, show us that no matter where we came from, who we were yesterday, that does not dictate our future. We can study, and we can learn, and we can apply what we've learned to accomplish great things. I very wholeheartedly believe that, because we've seen it over and over and over again throughout history, that if you really study and you really pursue something, no matter where you came from, what kind of household you grew up in, you can do very, very great things.
I definitely agree.
So let's look at the next one. Who is that, Martin?
Her name is Jan Matzeliger.
Thank you.
So Jan Matzeliger. At night he sat creating methods for emulating the mannerisms of the handlasters and sketched out approximate drawings of a device that might work in the same manner. Soon, Matzeliger began putting together a raw working model of his creation.
Well, let's think about that for a second. So, Matzeliger, he went out, he visioned something, he figured out how it was supposed to work, and he didn't have the information that we have today where you can just go on your phone and Google search it. He actually had to figure it out and work for it and work for the information that he got. So I think that this is possibly an example proving my earlier point, if you would think that way.
That is definitely a way you could look at it, but I would say that it's a bit too inconclusive, but difficult to refute simply because we don't have the situation of, should he have had the information at his fingertips like we have today, would he have been able to design this quicker, more effective, or to have it work better than it did at that time? We just wouldn't know.
Maybe we wouldn't know anything about him if he had that information quick, because he wouldn't have been a big impact on the African American community.
Perhaps not.
Well, we can't go back in time and replay it, so we would never know, but it's something to ponder. Damani says that these are links to very great heroes whose history is lost. Before we pick this up in your high school experience, have you learned about any of these guys?
I had not heard of half of them.
I haven't. So I've always heard of all of the negative things that we always hear. And though those are very, very sad and very, very tragic things that are in our history, and we cannot ignore them, we have to recognize that Black history isn't all sad. It definitely has its ups and downs, just like any other history. definitely has its accomplishments, and I think in the future it's going to have even more. Where we won't even say like, oh, this is a great achievement for the African American community. We'll say this is a great achievement for mankind. I think that's a great thing that we're trying to work for. People complain that we shouldn't have Black History Month, but it is like we already don't have one of these things. People are not mentioned in history class. So I think what he's trying to say here is that we don't learn about this in history class. We don't very much look at the accomplishments that the African American community has made. We tend to look at the negatives, and if you're a young African American growing up and all you hear in your history is all these negatives and your ancestors were enslaved, and that can make you very angry for people around you. So I think Damani has a very great point here. All we hear about is the lynchings and the beatings and the rapings of our people, and he says at the end, and I think this is very powerful, spread some positivity. We live in a world today where we have so many different trials and tribulations and temptations and decision making and problems that go on, and it's very, very opening and very light to talk about the positive things, but we can't ignore those negative things either.
I would agree. As MLK once said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. I think that would be a great example.
Jesus in the Bible said the greatest of all is love. And if we had more love in this world, we wouldn't have all of the turmoil that we have today. But I think a lot of that has to do with people forgetting about where they came from and trying to just progress themselves and trying to progress the world in a way which it doesn't necessarily need to go. When you look at history on a standpoint, these African American history, by example, these people who were stripped out of their homelands, were put on a boat with nothing but their minds to go by, and then they brought music, culture, literature, all of these different and great things to our country that have made their way into our society, and we really just don't recognize it.
It almost feels as though we're not worthy enough.
Right.
In some regards.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. African American history is definitely something that needs to be remembered and never forgotten. It really boils my blood when I hear people, why do we have Black History Month? Where's our White History Month? Every day is White History Day. I'm gonna put that out right here because when we talk about our founding fathers, the great people. They set this country together, and those were all very great things. We gained our independence from Great Britain, all of these very great things, but we forget that these are the same people that were enslaving African Americans. And, everybody has their goods and their faults. There's definitely faults that we can't ignore about our founding fathers. So, everybody wants to say, America, I want it to go back to the way it used to be. I am glad it's not the way it used to be.
That's mine.
Because we would have a lot of people in chains. America has never been where it needs to be, and we need to try and push America to where it needs to be. Forget all of this politically correctness stuff. Forget everything that, we want to censor ourselves so that people aren't offended by the truth. Truth is truth, no matter what people's feelings are about it, in my opinion. I think that we shouldn't sacrifice truth to save feelings.
I concur.
You think? Yeah. I think that if we begin to sacrifice truth to save feelings, then we're going to have just a bunch of sheep that we do now. Where the media posts something, they put it in like a meme or something very easy to spread, and it's like just big headlines, and no one takes the time to read the full story. And that's why we're here today. We're going to give you the full story of everything, and our slogan is the rest of the story. Do you have anything to add about Black History Month, or the importance of it, or anything like that, Martin?
I'll address the argument of why don't we have a White History Month. The reason why I think that argument is as pervasive as it is right now is because people get confused the concepts of equality and fairness, otherwise known as equity. Just because it would be equal for us to do that doesn't mean that it would be the fair thing to do. White people, Caucasians, Europeans in specific, have not had to struggle in oppression in the same way that African Americans have. And I think to make a White History Month honoring people that we see every day in history books, it's almost as if it's a slap in the face, or what it seems like, to African American culture and everyone in the culture.
The same people that we would be celebrating in a White History Month are the same people that were enslaving African Americans. So should they really be celebrated? Maybe for their accomplishments, but just as we try to focus on the negative of Black History Month and the Black history, if we just focus on the positives of white history, that's also an injustice. We have to focus on the negatives for white history and the positives of Black history, and we'll have balance.
Well, as we all know, all good things must come to an end. We thank you for your attention today greatly. We encourage you to follow us on social media, such as Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube, where we'll be putting out updates and perhaps sneak peeks to next week's show. It is our most high honor to do our part in exercising the First Amendment. If you have any questions about this week's program or anything in general, feel free to leave us a comment. We will do our best to respond. We'll see you back here next week on Digging In.
May God bless you and keep you till the next appointed time.